Miami, the Magic City. Art Deco buildings bathed in neon light, ocean breezes sweeping across South Beach, a skyline that keeps reaching higher, glass towers reflecting endless blue sky. For decades, this was the American dream with a tropical twist. The place where you could reinvent yourself, build wealth, and live in perpetual sunshine. No state income tax, beaches at your doorstep, a lifestyle that looked like vacation all year round. The city sold itself as the future, the place where America's next chapter was being written. And people bought it. They packed up their lives from New York, California, the Midwest, and moved south, chasing the promise of paradise and prosperity. But walk through Miami today, talk to people who actually live here, and you will hear a very different story. The rent is crushing. The insurance is impossible. The flooding is getting worse. And the people who built their lives here, the teachers, nurses, service workers, mid-level professionals, they are quietly packing up and leaving. Not because they want to, but because they cannot afford to stay anymore. The numbers tell a story that conflicts with every real estate promotion and influencer post. Miami is not the opportunity it pretends to be. It is a city pricing out everyone except the ultra-wealthy, and the exodus is accelerating. I spent weeks talking to residents, former residents, real estate agents, insurance brokers, and city workers. What I found was not just an affordability crisis. It was a systematic unraveling of the promise Miami made to the middle class. And it is happening faster than anyone wants to admit. Let me take you inside what is really happening. Start with the most basic question. Can normal people even afford to live here anymore? The answer is increasingly no. A one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood now runs $2,400 to $3,200 per month. Not in South Beach, not in Brickell, but in normal residential areas where people actually live and work. That same apartment rented for $1,600 just 4 years ago. That is not gradual inflation. That is a 50% to 100% increase in rents, while wages stayed essentially flat. I talked to a teacher who has worked in Miami-Dade schools for 8 years. She makes $52,000 annually, which sounds reasonable until you realize that after taxes, she is bringing home maybe $3,400 monthly. Her rent just went from $1,750 to $2,600 in a single lease renewal. And that is 76% of her take-home pay going to rent alone before she buys groceries, pays for her car, or covers utilities. She told me she is leaving at the end of the school year, moving back to North Carolina, where she can afford to live. She is not unique. The school district is hemorrhaging teachers because they literally cannot survive on teacher salaries in Miami anymore. But rent is just the entry fee. The real damage comes from the stack of costs that pile on after. Car insurance in Miami runs $2,800 to $4,500 annually for a clean driving record. That is the highest in the nation, driven by uninsured drivers, insurance fraud, and aggressive litigation. Health insurance premiums keep climbing. Groceries cost 15% to 20% more than the national average. Gas, parking, tolls on the highways, it all adds up. Then there is the big one. Homeowners insurance. If you are lucky enough to own property, you are getting destroyed. Insurance premiums have tripled in some cases, quadrupled in others. A homeowner in Coral Gables told me her annual premium went from $3,200 in 2020 to $11,800 this year. Same house, same coverage, just a 268% increase in 4 years. Her mortgage payment stayed the same, but her total housing cost jumped by $8,600 annually. That is an extra $715 per month, and there is nothing she can do about it. Some insurance companies just stopped writing policies in Florida entirely. They pulled out of the market, deciding the risk was not worth it. The companies that remain are charging whatever they want because they can. Homeowners are trapped. You cannot get a mortgage without insurance. You cannot sell easily when buyers see the insurance costs. You cannot afford to stay when the premiums eat your entire paycheck. Here is where it gets worse. The insurance crisis is not a temporary problem that will correct itself. It is structural, driven by climate risk that is only going to intensify. Miami sits at sea level, built on porous limestone that absorbs water like a sponge. The city floods now during regular high tides in some neighborhoods. King tides bring seawater bubbling up through storm drains, flooding streets without a drop of rain. I walked through neighborhoods in Miami Beach and Shorecrest where water pools on streets twice a month just from tidal cycles. Homeowners describe parking their cars on blocks during king tides to keep engines above water. Business owners in ground floor retail spaces keep sandbags stacked by their doors year-round. This is not some distant future scenario. This is happening right now, today, and it is getting worse. Hurricane risk has intensified. Insurance companies are not stupid. They look at Miami and see a city that will face more frequent, more severe storms. They see rising sea levels that will make flooding worse. They see building stock that is aging and vulnerable. So they either leave the market entirely or price policies to reflect the actual risk. The result is insurance costs that make home ownership prohibitively expensive for anyone who is not wealthy. And here is the kicker. The local government cannot fix this. They are trying, investing in pumps and drainage systems, raising roads, hardening infrastructure. But the fundamental problem remains. You cannot engineer your way out of rising sea levels. You cannot pump water fast enough when the ocean is literally higher than the land. The infrastructure investments are buying time, not solving the problem, and homeowners are paying for those investments through property taxes that keep climbing even as their homes become harder to sell. I spoke with a real estate agent who has worked in Miami for 22 years. She told me off the record that the market has fundamentally changed. 5 years ago, she sold homes to families, professionals building lives and careers in Miami. Now she mostly sells to cash buyers from Latin America and wealthy Americans looking for second or third homes. The people who actually live and work in Miami cannot compete with cash offers from buyers who do not need mortgages and do not care about insurance costs because these properties are just small pieces of their overall portfolios. Now let's talk about what daily life actually feels like for the people trying to stay, because this is where the human cost becomes undeniable. Miami's traffic is absolutely crushing. The infrastructure was designed for a smaller population and has not kept pace with growth. Commutes that should take 25 minutes take 75 minutes during rush periods. You sit on I-95 or the Palmetto Expressway, inching forward, watching your life waste away in gridlock. Public transit exists, but it is limited and inefficient for most workers. The Metro Rail serves some areas but does not reach many residential neighborhoods where people can afford to live. Buses are slow and unreliable. Most people need cars, which means sitting in traffic daily, burning gas, and paying those astronomical insurance premiums. The heat has become oppressive. Miami was always hot, but the combination of rising temperatures, humidity, and urban heat island effects has made summer unbearable. You cannot walk anywhere. You cannot enjoy outdoor spaces for much of the year. You move from air-conditioned car to air-conditioned building to air-conditioned home. Your electric bill in summer runs $300 to $500 monthly just to keep your apartment at a survivable temperature. The healthcare system is strained. Wait times at hospitals and clinics have increased. Finding a primary care doctor accepting new patients is difficult. Specialists are booked months out. The infrastructure cannot keep pace with the population growth, and the workers who staff these facilities cannot afford to live here either. Schools are overcrowded and underfunded. Class sizes have ballooned. Programs have been cut. Teachers are leaving faster than they can be replaced, creating a staffing crisis that directly impacts education quality. Parents who move to Miami hoping for good schools for their children find a system that is struggling to function. Crime has ticked upward in some neighborhoods as economic pressure intensifies. Property crime, car thefts, break-ins, all increasing as people who are desperate make desperate choices. The police force is understaffed because officers cannot afford to live in the city they patrol. Starting salary for Miami police is around $50,000, which does not cover rent in most neighborhoods. So the city cannot recruit enough officers, and the ones they have are stretched thin. Here is the thing nobody wants to acknowledge. Miami's response to these problems is not to fix affordability or improve infrastructure for working people. It is to double down on luxury development and catering to the ultra-wealthy. Drive through downtown, through Brickell, through Edgewater, and count the construction cranes. New luxury towers going up everywhere, advertised with starting prices at $800,000, $2 million, $5 million. These are not buildings for people who work in Miami. These are investment properties for international capital. We're second homes for the wealthy, assets to park money. The new supply is not relieving pressure for middle-income residents. It is creating inventory for a completely different buyer class. Developers are not building affordable housing because there is no profit in it. They build luxury because that is where the margins are, and the city approves these projects because they generate tax revenue and contribute to the image of Miami as a global city. But for the teachers, nurses, firefighters, service workers, retail employees, the people who make the city function, this development does nothing. It actually makes things worse because luxury buildings drive up surrounding property values, which drives up rents, which pushes more people out. Also, the policy response has been focused on attracting more wealthy residents through tax incentives and business-friendly regulations. The pitch is that Miami is becoming the new financial capital, that tech companies and finance firms are relocating here from New York and California. That is true to some extent. Some companies have opened offices, some wealthy executives have moved, but those arrivals make affordability worse for everyone else. When someone making $500,000 annually moves to Miami, they can easily pay $6,000 monthly rent or buy a $3 million condo. That sets new price floors that everyone else cannot reach. The landlord, who used to rent to a family for $2,000, realizes they can get $4,000 from a tech worker. The family gets priced out. This is not organic growth creating opportunity for everyone. This is a deliberate restructuring of who the city is for. And the answer is increasingly clear. Miami is for the rich. Everyone else is being systematically pushed out. Let's talk about the quiet exodus that is already happening, because the signals are everywhere if you know where to look. School enrollment data shows families withdrawing mid-year, a pattern that suggests financial pressure forcing relocations. Real estate agents report increasing numbers of sellers who are relocating out of state to places where their home equity can buy them more affordable lives. The U-Haul Price Index shows one-way rentals from Miami to destinations like North Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas are significantly more expensive than the reverse, indicating higher demand for leaving than arriving among middle-income movers. Social media groups for Miami expats have exploded in size. Thousands of former residents sharing stories about where they moved and why. The common thread is always the same. We loved Miami, but we could not afford to stay. One couple I interviewed worked in hospitality management, combined income around $110,000 annually. They rented a 2-bedroom apartment for $2,800 monthly, paid $380 for car insurance, another $200 for health insurance beyond their employer coverage. They were saving nothing. Every month they were spending everything they earned just to maintain their lifestyle. They did the math and realized they would never own a home in Miami, never build equity, never have financial security. So they moved to Charlotte. They took slight pay cuts, but their rent dropped to $1,600 for a larger place. Their car insurance is $140 monthly. Their cost of living fell so dramatically that despite earning less, they are saving $1,500 monthly. That is the calculation thousands of people are making. The Miami salary premium, the supposed benefit of higher wages, does not exist for most workers. Wages have not kept pace with cost of living increases. A job that pays $65,000 in Miami might pay $58,000 in Nashville, but your expenses in Nashville are 40% lower. The math pushes you out. And here is what makes the exodus particularly damaging. The people leaving are exactly the people a city needs to function. The teachers, healthcare workers, police officers, firefighters, civil servants, tradespeople, service workers. When they leave, the entire system starts to break down. Schools cannot find teachers. Hospitals cannot staff positions. Kid restaurants cannot hire servers. Construction companies cannot find workers. The city becomes increasingly dependent on long commutes from people who live in cheaper areas and drive into Miami for work, or on a revolving door of workers who come temporarily and leave when they realize the economics do not work. The wealthy do not care because they can afford to insulate themselves from these problems. They pay for private schools, private healthcare, private security. They do not sit in traffic because they live in penthouses downtown walking distance to their offices. They do not worry about flooding because they can afford to sell and move if necessary. The city works fine for them. But it is breaking for everyone else. Here is what the future looks like if current trends continue. Miami becomes an increasingly bifurcated city. The ultra-wealthy in their waterfront towers and gated communities. The service workers living in far-flung suburbs or neighboring counties, commuting hours daily to jobs that barely cover their expenses. And a hollowed-out middle, with fewer and fewer people able to bridge those two extremes. The brain drain accelerates. Young professionals who might have built careers in Miami realize they can earn similar money elsewhere with dramatically better quality of life. They leave for Atlanta, Austin, Denver, cities where their salary actually builds wealth rather than just covering rent. The tax base erodes as middle-income earners leave and get replaced by retirees and part-time residents who spend less locally. The city becomes more dependent on tourism and real estate transaction taxes, revenue sources that are volatile and subject to economic cycles. Infrastructure continues deteriorating because the city cannot afford necessary investments while also dealing with climate adaptation costs. Roads crumble. Transit stays inadequate. Flood control infrastructure cannot keep pace with rising seas. The schools get worse as the funding base shrinks and staffing becomes impossible. Property values might continue rising in prime areas because international demand stays strong, but large swaths of the city become harder to sell as buyers realize the climate risk, insurance costs, and infrastructure problems. Some neighborhoods become uninsurable, making mortgages impossible, and property values collapse. The social fabric tears. A city needs a middle class to function as a real community, rather than just a collection of wealthy enclaves and service zones. When that middle disappears, you lose the coaches, teachers, volunteers, small business owners, and community leaders who make neighborhoods work. What is left feels hollow, even if it looks prosperous. Some will argue I am being too pessimistic, that Miami has always been resilient, that people have predicted its decline before and been wrong. That is partly true. Miami has weathered challenges and continued growing, but this time is different. Previous challenges were temporary. This is structural. The climate risk is not going away. It is intensifying. The insurance crisis is not a market anomaly. It is a rational response to real risk. The cost of living is not a bubble that will pop. It is driven by supply constraints, international demand, and policy choices that favor development for the wealthy over affordability for workers. The physics and economics both point in the same direction, toward a city that becomes increasingly uninhabitable for normal people. The government knows this. Behind the cheerleading and optimistic economic development announcements, there is real concern. Some officials are trying to push affordable housing initiatives, inclusionary zoning, rent stabilization. But these efforts are small compared to the scale of the problem, and they face fierce opposition from developers and property owners who benefit from the current system. The political will to make hard choices does not exist because the people with power are the people profiting from the status quo. So where does this leave us? Miami sits at a crossroads. The city can continue on its current path, becoming a playground for the ultra-wealthy while pushing out everyone else. That is the trajectory we are on. The hotels will stay full of tourists. The luxury condos will sell to international buyers. The skyline will keep growing. But the soul of the city, the community that makes a place livable rather than just profitable, that will be gone. The alternative requires admitting the current model is failing normal residents and making dramatic changes to prioritize affordability, climate adaptation, and sustainable growth over luxury development and real estate speculation. It requires rent controls, massive affordable housing investment, insurance market reform, and infrastructure spending that puts residents over investors. I do not see evidence that those changes are coming. The momentum is all in the other direction. More luxury towers announced, more wealthy transplants arriving, more middle-class families calculating their exit strategies. The people I talked to who are leaving Miami do not hate the city. Most love it. They love the culture, the weather, the energy, the diversity. But love does not pay rent. Love does not cover insurance. Love does not protect you from flooding or traffic or a school system that is falling apart. They are making rational economic decisions based on the reality they live rather than the image Miami projects. And increasingly, that decision is to leave. Nobody wants to leave Miami. They are being forced out by an economic model that has decided they do not belong anymore. The city built its identity on being accessible, on being the place where anyone could come and make it, where the American dream had palm trees and ocean views. That promise is breaking. What comes next is a city that looks prosperous on the surface while being fundamentally hollowed out underneath. The Instagram posts will still look perfect, the real estate will still sell, the headlines will still talk about Miami's boom. But the people who make a city actually work, they will keep leaving, one U-Haul at a time, until what is left is not really a city anymore. Just a collection of expensive real estate with nobody left to live in it except those wealthy enough to not notice or care that the community is gone.